For the first time in 2,000 years, Jews had a state of their own. Though it represented only 1/6 of 1% of the Middle East, that was unacceptable to the Muslims. Instead, Hassan al-Banna, founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, said in 1948, "If the Jewish state becomes a fact, the Arabs will drive the Jews who live in their midst into the sea." When the Jews had virtually no land, the Muslims vowed to destroy them and drive them into the sea. So why should they believe the Arabs will not seek to destroy the remainder of the present-day Israel if they give them back the same land they had in 1948? The Middle East war is not about land. The Muslims justify their war against Israel by saying the Jews stole their land and then occupied it. The facts prove these claims to be false. On May 15, 1948, the day after Israel declared statehood, 5 surrounding Arab nations simultaneously attacked the infant nation. The attacking Arab governments urged the Arabs in the new nation of Israel to flee their homes. They promised to butcher the Jews in a few weeks. Then the refugees could return to their homes and claim the booty that was left. But the surrounding governments failed to make good on their promise. Against all odds, the Jews held them off. Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the Palestinian Authority, wrote, "The Arab armies entered Palestine to protect the Palestinians from the Zionist tyranny, but instead they abandoned them, forced them to immigrate and to leave their homeland, imposed upon them political and ideological blockade, and threw them into prison similar to the ghettos in which the Jews used to live in Eastern Europe." The ironic fact is that almost 1 million Arabs remained and did not leave. Today, these Arabs have more freedom as full Israeli citizens than their fellow Arabs in any Muslim country. If, as Jimmy Carter and his liberal cohorts claim, the Jews are ruthless occupiers and thieves, then why do the Israeli Arabs have more rights than Arabs in the Muslim states? Abbas's statement brings out a grossly ignored fact. The Muslims are more barbaric to each other than any other people. They have treated the Palestinian refugees more ruthlessly than Israel ever has. For the most part, they have refused to accept them and give them full citizenship. They have deliberately kept them in concentration camps in order to fan their fires of hatred toward the Jews. Back in the 70s, Jordan's King Hussein stopped the Palestinian revolt by turning artillery on Palestinian refugee camps filled with women and children, much the same as happened in Lebanon just a month or so ago. It was called the Black September event. Remember the barbarity of Saddam Hussein toward Iran in their nearly 10-year war. He used chemical weapons against them. And the Ayatollah Khomeini sent young boys into minefields to clear the way for his troops in a battle against Iraq. The Muslim world conveniently sweeps these things under the table. It's only the alleged Jewish mistreatment that they feature to the media. It's transparently done for propaganda purposes to win Western support for their cause. And the liberal Western media buys it hook, line, and sinker. The Middle East war is not about refugees. When Israel became a state in 1948, 850,000 Jews were forced to flee Muslim countries with only the clothes on their backs. Many of these Jews were from communities that had existed for thousands of years. But you never hear about the Jews' refugee problem because the Israelis resettled them in Israel. In contrast, the Muslims put their displaced fellow Arabs into concentration camps and to this day have never accepted them, assimilated them, or offered them citizenship. Yet Israel extended full citizenship to the Arabs who stayed, and the Jews are not welcome in most Muslim countries today. The Palestinian cause is not about self-determination. Muslims and the useful idiots of the West claim that the Middle East is a constant conflict because the Palestinians yearn for a state and Israel refuses to give it to them. Both of these claims are false. The Palestinians were offered statehood in 1948 and again in 2000. Both times they responded with armed aggression and terrorist attacks. From 1948 to 1967, Egypt possessed Gaza and Jordan possessed the West Bank. Why did they not offer that land to their fellow Arabs and Palestinians as a state? It's the same land they now want Israel to give them. Perhaps the Egyptians and the Jordanians know something we don't. The Middle East crisis is really about the annihilation of Israel and the Jews. According to the Muslim propaganda machine, the cause of the Middle East conflict is the Israeli occupation of Arab land. This, too, is false. In 2000, Israel withdrew in force from the southern Lebanon, which they had occupied to stop terrorist rocket attacks on Israeli towns in the north. Hezbollah and Hamas immediately began launching missiles supplied by Iran against Israeli civilians in the northern Israel. In 2005, Israel withdrew its military forces from Gaza, which they had occupied to prevent terrorist attacks. As soon as Israel withdrew and forcibly removed the Jewish settlements, Hamas began launching rockets against towns and schools inside southern Israel. But these terrorists were not a rogue element. They are members of Hamas. And the vast majority of Palestinians voted for Hamas in the last general election and gave them control of the Palestinian government. Surveys show they would do it again. If the Palestinians have immediately and relentlessly attacked Israel, both from Lebanon and Gaza, when the Israelis gave them that land to them, why do we think they will not do the same when Israel gives them the West Bank and the Golan Heights? The Muslims openly declare their goal. Why do we not listen and believe them? At the World Without Zionism conference in 2005, Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad declared, as the Imam, meaning the Ayatollah Khomeini, said, Israel must be wiped off the map. The Islamic community will not allow its historic enemy to live in the heartland. Anyone who signs a treaty which recognizes the entity of Israel means that he has signed the surrender of the Muslim world. At a later public conference, he said, like it or not, the Zionist regime is headed toward annihilation. The Zionist regime is a rotten, dried tree that will be eliminated by one storm. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah is even more blunt. At various times he has said, the Jews are a cancer which is liable to spread again at any moment. There's no solution to the conflict except with the disappearance of Israel. If they all gather in Israel, it will save us the trouble of going after them worldwide. Folks, all of this is fitting into the exact predictions about the reborn state of Israel in the last days. When I return, I'll share with you what the Bible tells us about this unreal and irrational hatred toward the nation of Israel.